We are back for another Business Analysis Live. My name is Susan Moore. I'm the Community Engagement Manager at IIBA.
And my name is Scott Bennett. I'm the Manager of Business Analysis here at the International Institute of Business Analysis. Hey, Susan, this is a special episode for us. We're at 50 episodes.
50. What started out as a little experiment is we're official. We've been doing this 50 times.
Yeah,
So that's
yeah,
it's pretty great. It's flown by.
it has. It has. We're having lots of fun with it. Today, we're going to talk about finding your transferable skills. So, this will be a great session for those of you who are thinking about getting into business analysis. How do you make that transition? We're going to talk through that with a guest today. But it's also helpful if you potentially are looking to grow your existing team, right, Susan?
Yeah, that's right. I think back to when I was leading a business analysis team at an insurance company, and many times when we were trying to grow our team, we knew of people on the business side who we had worked with who had some great skills around communication and analysis, and with their domain expertise, they could really be valuable as business analysis professionals, and we would bring them over to the business analysis side and teach them the rest of the skills. So this can also be a way, if you are a leader or you're part of a business analysis team that works with business folks, it can be a way to think about how to find people within your organization who you can add to your team.
That's right. Yeah. So, why don't we introduce our guest? Please welcome Laura Brandenburg. Hello, Laura.
Hey, Susan and Scott, thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here today. It's a great
Yeah,
topic.
yeah,
Yeah.
welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us. Give us your background for those that aren't familiar with your name.
Yeah, so I am the founder and CEO of Bridging the Gap, which is bridgingthegap.com with hyphens. I founded that. It really started as a blog 15 years ago, a bit of an experiment, like you talked about with your podcast. And over the last 15 years has morphed into a full-fledged training company. We have our own certification for business analysts, and we really specialize in helping people start and succeed in their business analyst careers. And I also authored a book, which I have here, How to Start a Business Analyst Career. So great resource for anybody looking to get into the profession.
Okay, I'm going to put you into full screen here. Can you hold that book up again so people can
Oh,
see
yeah,
it?
sure. Thank you. How to Start a Business Analyst Career. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Laura also has a fantastic YouTube channel in the business analysis space, one of the best channels that are out there. Subscribers, I think you're at 34,000, so that's fantastic. You really made great headway in that space.
Thank you so much, Scott.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, Scott is a YouTuber outside of his, business analysis day job.
Yes.
So, and if we're talking about milestones, he just hit 100,000 viewers on or subscribers, I guess, right, on
Yes.
YouTube. So
subscribers.
that's
Yeah,
kind of a big deal.
yeah.
Just
So
kind
yeah,
of.
just a
Yeah.
little.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a day of celebration. Also, Laura, I think I have read that book. I feel like I've been following your journey for
Mm.
such a long time. And I know I have definitely read your blog and viewed some of your online videos over the years. So thanks for all your contributions to our community.
You're welcome, and thank you for being part of it. That's like
Yeah.
that's what makes
Yeah.
things go around. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
right.
So, Laura, when people are thinking about getting into business analysis and we talk about these transferable skills, tell us a little bit about what that means, the transferable skills for business analysis.
Yeah, it really, I mean, I think we almost do it an injustice calling it a transferable skill. It's really just a skill, right? But people, I think, think of it as like how a skill that they built in a different role other than business analysis or a formal business analyst role that they can use and leverage as part of positioning themselves as a qualified, experienced, and ready to be successful business analyst. So it could be soft skills like in communication and facilitation, but I also find that people really often have some analytical or what would be more the technical side of the BA role, but not like coding
Okay.
technical, but analytical transferable skills as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the easy one first, the
Yeah.
soft skills, as we like to call them. Um, if someone's currently in a professional role, what are the typical soft skills that can help them get into a business analysis role?
Yeah, so I mean, communication is the big one, right? So
Yeah.
any sort of way that you have shown your ability to communicate well, to share a point of view, to ask good questions, to get stakeholders on the same page, or gain agreement about a go forward plan of action, facilitating meetings, handling complex email chains that go off the rails. Like these are all things that business analysts do every day, just as part of their job, and that are very likely that you may have done in a different role. So, like from a communication perspective, like if you think of even a role like customer support, right? You were probably on
Okay.
the phone with a customer, you're asking questions to understand their problem, you're explaining what might be a complex technical solution in an easier to understand way. And a lot of that communication is very similar, though a different kind, but similar to what you would do in a business analysis role. So you want to pull that forward and really be able to speak to that with confidence. Yeah.
One of the things that we were talking about before we met today was that, part of maybe why we have a hard time finding our own transferable skills is because those skills that you just mentioned, maybe we don't see them as valuable to the ways that we work, right? Everybody talks, everybody writes as part of their work. So, why do you think people don't value what they already have in those soft skills?
Yeah, what I see is just this like people often can get in their own way and it's like the business analysis role is so critical and so important. There's so much to learn and you're always growing, but people see like they see themselves in the gap of like what is it that's different about me instead of
Mhm.
here's what I can bring forward, right? And so it's that imposter syndrome that honestly plagues a lot of practicing business analysts as well, but has us, whether we're practicing or coming in, often underestimate the value of what we can contribute. And I just always hear like, oh, yes, I did that, but yes, I did that, but it was not on a real project. Or yes, I did that, but it was a small project, not a big project. Or yes, I did that, but it was informal, right? So it's just, there's always this like, but that gets in the way of really claiming, yes, I did that, right? Instead, and kind of leaving the second part off.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think when growing a team, someone who's a business analysis professional can help someone pull them in and sort of say,
Mhm.
"Hey, you've done this, you've done this." But what if it's the other side of the equation? What if you're trying to break into the field? How do you advise people to figure out the value of those transferable skills?
Yeah, I think it does help to get feedback from a business analyst or from somebody in the profession. And when I was doing coaching on this, I would ask people, like, tell me about the project you did that was most like a business analyst project, right? And then we would walk through what they did, what kind of meetings they held, what kind of documents they created, what kind of challenges they faced, and then I would help them like position it and transfer it into how
Mhm.
that related to business analysis. So I think, if you're thinking about getting in, having somebody that you could talk to and have those conversations, like reaching out through your IIBA chapter or the mentoring program, like finding somebody to have that conversation with can like give you a lot of solidification around what actually counts as business analysis experience. Yeah.
I'm hearing a couple of themes, a couple of things that people could take away from today as we're talking about this. And one of those I think is a little bit of a mindset shift.
Mm-hmm.
As BAs, we tend to think in terms of what are the gaps? Where do I want to be? Where am I now? What's the gap? And maybe when it comes to ourselves, we could be a little more compassionate. And so instead of saying, what am I not doing? Say, what am I doing? What am I doing that is valuable? And how could I continue to build on that or show that in so that I can showcase those things that I am doing? Another thing I'm hearing is just that self-reflection. Again, this is that moment of quiet, that moment of, and we talked about this actually with Paula Bell, that moment of just thinking about yourself, the things that you're doing and where you want to be. And then the last piece that you just mentioned was inventorying, really inventorying those skills and having a person, a peer, a coach, somebody that you can talk with, who you can bounce off of, like, are these things valuable? How can I see these things in a different way? So I think that's some of what I hear us talking about when we're trying to find those transferable skills.
100%. Yeah. So taking the time and like, I mean, I know when I went through my CBAT prep process, which I'm up for, I think my third or fourth recertification. So it was quite a while ago, but like part of that inventory you did, and especially in the old work experience, right, was like figuring out, well, okay, I'm reading this section of the Maybach or this technique. When did I do it? Right? When have I done something like this? And I was able to pull a lot of years of experience out of my more formal VA roles, but I also was able to pull a fair amount out of my quality assurance role of where I had built it was like a test plan, but it was really a business process because I was defining it from the ground up and I was collaborating with users across the company to understand their requirements for testing. And so I was able to pull out that business analysis experience. And so that's really the inventory you do for applying for a certification, also is very relevant to this from a skills perspective.
Something else that we were talking about today is we were talking about the language of business analysis. Sometimes it's just that we aren't familiar with the terms, and so sometimes we might actually have those skills, but we called them something different, or organization deployed them in a different way. Maybe let's talk about how terminology might get in the way of
Yeah.
of thinking about those skills.
Yeah, one of the examples from our participants in our courses that I'll like never forget this call that I was on, and it was a course we still offer today on use cases and wireframes. And the person had said he joined our wireframes course because he was in a job interview, and he was asked, like, "Have you ever done wireframes?" He said no, and he didn't get the job. And then he's like, "But I had done these things called mock-ups, and now that I'm like going through your training on what a wireframe is, it's like there's a lot of similarities, right?" And I was like, yeah, you totally could have said you've done wireframes or even just shown an example or spoken to that example of what you had done and allowed the interviewer to see like how close you were to what they were talking about. So I do think sometimes just understanding the terminology and how many words, how many different ways that we might use to talk about the same outcome or output, can bring a lot of clarity. So we think that we did something that was informal, but we really did something very close to what would count as that official term in a job description or that somebody's asking you about in an interview.
Right.
Yeah.
So that gets into some of the analytical skills that you had
Mhm.
mentioned earlier, right? So soft skills, analytical skills. What are the other examples that you might have around analytical skills that people may have done but not really realize that this helps them in the business analysis field?
Yeah, a lot of times people will say, they'll even have it on their resume, like, I did documentation. Right. And so then I'm like, well, what kind of documentation? What were you documenting? Who was using that? How were they using that? And sometimes as you start to talk through it, that documentation was actually very close to a business process. Sometimes it was more like a use case or a set of functional requirements. It's like, oh, it was a bullet list of all the things that we needed the developers to do. And it's like, oh, well, let's like look at that. And like, these are maybe not exactly formally written requirements, but they are essentially software requirements, right? So looking at the kinds of documentation that you've created and mapping that again against the business analysis skill set to see where it might actually be an implementation of a business analyst analytical skill.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. That's good. We are live today and we're taking questions. We see them trickling in here. We will get to those questions shortly, but if there's something on your mind, put it in the comments there and we will get to questions soon.
Yeah, we've got Laura here to answer those. So yeah, please ask your questions. I'm thinking about terminology, and one of the guides that IIBA creates. It's called the Business Analysis Standard. I often refer to it as the language of business analysis. That might be, a great starting point if
Mhm.
you are thinking about getting into a business analysis, if you're managing business analysis, if you are a business analyst and you want to help to pull people onto your team. The business analysis standard, it's only about, I think it's 50 or 60 pages. It's a free download, but that can be a good way for you to start to learn the language, and maybe where you have to do some of that mapping of your skills, you can read through and think, oh, I have done one of these. So the business analysis standard actually might, so I recommend that download to get you started, or you can just use the full Babok guide, which is a deeper dive, into business analysis.
For sure, for sure.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's one thing that we hear from people that do certifications as well, is they might, so for someone who's experienced and looking for their CBAP certification, you have to have a number of years of experience at that. The one thing that people find when they're preparing for that is using the language in the Babok guide, using that standardized language that was developed around the globe is really a key piece for them. So yeah, the language you write, Susan, it is important.
Yeah, it is. And again, I think, what we do is very accessible, but there just are certain terms that we use that might not be familiar to you if you've not worked with business analysis teams.
Yeah.
And then I think that's so important to understand like the standard terminology as a like a jumping point, and then also recognize that like not all employers are using that terminology, right? So like
Great
you
point.
might need to translate your skills into that, and then you might need to translate it out of that again to speak the language of a specific position or a specific hiring manager or a specific team. And so like really, like even in a job interview, like if you don't know the term, I often like ask like, well, I've done this, like is that kind of like what you're looking for, as opposed to just a flat out no, like
Okay.
clarifying some of those terms, which is also, you're showing a business analysis skill there, which clarifying terminology is something that you're doing with your business stakeholders. But like, why not ask and clarify and give yourself the chance to succeed, if, as opposed to just saying like a flat out no, I've never done that, right? You're not going to be any further behind by asking the question.
I think this is such an important point. So let's just make this again, is that many times organizations have their own terminology that they use that is not standard, what we might think of as standard business analysis terminology. So if that is the case in your organization, make sure that you map the organization's terms even to some standard language, so that if you go someplace else, you're interviewing for a job, you have the ability to do that mapping very quickly in your head. Oh, we did mock-ups. Yes, we did wireframes. So
Yeah.
I think it's important.
Yeah.
All right. Do we want to take some questions?
Sure. Why don't we jump into it?
Yeah, I feel like we've got some good questions here. All right, so here is the first question. This is from Pranav. I'm in retail operations. How can I transfer my skills to business analysis? And how would an IIBA certification help me? So a two-parter here. Retail operations. Have you guys worked in retail operations? Are you familiar with that domain?
Only in the credit card space.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, not me specifically either, though I can imagine like any sort of operational role usually has some element of business process and business process improvement, right? So if you were defining how your retail operations work, or how specific people were roles were doing specific functions, and what those, maybe it's standard operating procedures or checklists or whatever, like that would be the starting point. That's the most common transferable skill I see from an analytical perspective on the business side, is that you've analyzed, improved, made a process more efficient. And so I would start looking in that area. You might also have had some like data analytics type experience if you were in operations and managing reports and looking at trends, which could help you more in the business intelligence space. So again, like you kind of want to look at what were the key functions that you did within that role, and how would they map versus kind of just at that global title level.
Yeah.
And
And I'll add to
Pranav,
the part two part, the IIBA certification that would help you. We have an entry certificate in business analysis. That's if you don't have experience. What it does is it gets you familiar with the language of business analysis to be able to understand the functions and how it's put together. Sorry, Susan, I interrupted you there.
Yeah, I was going to add, actually, I see that Pranav has an MBA as part of
Mm,
his headline. And, with that MBA, you are likely doing a lot of things that business analysts might do in their organization. Everything from understanding business operations to working on strategy to understanding your enterprise. So, I mean, MBA, that's kind of a big deal as well. You have built you have built analytical skills, but you have also probably built some strategic skills that would be very valuable if once you move over into business analysis. So good luck, Pranav. Good luck on that. Alrighty, so here is our next question. I think this is when we were talking about soft skills. And are they soft because they can't be quantified or certified? And how do we demonstrate these in a resume, for example? This is a great question.
yeah. So I feel like this is the part of the resume where it's kind of comes through in it almost reading between the lines, right? So you want your resume to have not just I completed X number of use cases, but what you did by, say, writing so many business processes or defining so many use cases. So creating clarity on the software outcomes, helping find efficiencies, and then speaking to some of the challenges. So when you think about the challenges that you've helped any sort of project team or initiative overcome, were there difficulties getting people on the same page? Were there difficulties getting a specific stakeholder involved? Right, those are ways where you leaned less on your quote unquote analytical skills and more on the soft skills, which soft, I do feel like I know a lot of people don't like that term. I use it because it's just the common way to talk about them, but there really are your next level value add type skills. Right. So, and it is more difficult to quantify, but when you start talking about the challenges that you've really helped teams work through, they just show up by default. Like you're shining a light on those it by not being so like just technical and like I did this, I got from A to B. It's like, well, what was the journey like? And that really allows you to speak to some of those things.
We've had a couple of career coaches on here and also in some of the webinars that we do, and they
Mm-hmm.
talk about when you're building your resume, think about achievements over responsibilities. And
Mm-hmm.
that is, I think, another way where you can shine a light on those soft skills, essential skills, underlying competencies, like whatever you want to call those things. When you talk about the things that you achieved in your role, you can factor in how your particular set of soft skills made that thing possible. So that's
Mm-hmm.
another avenue for that. Also, I think as BAs, we had Yulia Kozarenko on twice, and we've talked about interviewing. And, for BAs, when you interview, you're kind of modeling your skills, your soft skills in the ability to interview and communicate and facilitate and, do all of those things. So that's another area where you can let your
Mm-hmm.
soft skills shine. It's a
Yes.
lot of S's.
And I'll add one more thing to the resume. We've talked about this a few times before. Toastmasters International is a great program for you to learn communication skills, and there are different certifications that you can get in that. Putting a Toastmaster certification on any resume will
Mm-hmm.
demonstrate that you have a certain level of competence in communication, which, as you said, Laura, is fundamental to what we do as business analyst professionals.
For sure.
Yeah, yeah, so important. Alrighty. So this comment, I don't have a name, but it sounds like we've got an ally here. So as a senior BA, I mentor aspiring and upcoming BAs. And how do I help aspiring BAs cultivate their transferable skills? How can he or she help them identify those skills? Great question.
Yeah, so I think similar to what I had shared about, like, asking them what kinds of projects do you work on, what kinds of work are you doing, and helping them make those connections. But in terms of the cultivation perspective, I think that's really allows us to go to a little bit of a new direction, right? Can you invite that person to a meeting? Would they be willing to take meeting notes for you? And that is, as a BA, I feel like we don't want to be branded as note takers, right? So I always hesitate to put that out there. But as an aspiring BA, being the note taker is a great position to really help you show that you understand what's happening in the meeting. Um, give you a position of leadership to ask questions if something's not clear as you're writing it down, have some follow-up afterwards to share. So like, could you help them get exposed to projects, start to take on maybe drafting some updates to your documentation or putting a first draft together that you then update, just helping them like shadow you and then giving them some early responsibilities on projects that impact their department or impact that they're excited to be a part of. And then that way you can start to see their skills and coach them and give them feedback and see how transferable and how quickly they might be ready to move into a full role on your team.
We've talked about that a little bit here, how, if you are looking to get into business analysis, can you volunteer for a project within your own organization? Many times, those opportunities are available. Heck, most of the times on any IT project, they're always looking for domain expertise. So that's the swap, right? You can come with especially if you're on the business side, you can come with that domain expertise, and in return, you can shadow someone who's been doing this and learn some really valuable skills. So yeah, and also that's just a great way of learning that language, learning it on the job. Yep. Alrighty, so let's see, what do we have next here? I have got here, let's see, this one. So Alatunde, 15 years experience, postgrad student of business analysis. What transferable skills do I have and how do I prove my analytical experience as an instructor? So here's how I'm interpreting this question. I've been an instructor of business analysis. How can I transfer that if he wanted to move into like the day-to-day project work of business analysis? What are some examples of skills that he might have from that instructor role?
Yeah, and actually, I'm not clear if he is an instructor of business analysis or has a diploma in business analysis.
Yep.
So I think a teacher is a really interesting one. You obviously have a skill set in translating complex ideas, making them concrete, right? And that is something that often we will do with our business stakeholders, translate complex technology ideas to help them understand what improvements or ideas are possible for the business. So I would look at your instruction part. I would look at the development of materials that you did. So did you analyze like were there a set of requirements that you needed to teach? How did you analyze that? How did you break that down into lesson plans? That shows your ability to organize a bunch of information. Possibly there's actually some requirements traceability there that you did. Like you're starting to get a little bit of a stretch there, but just at least to be able to show the mindset and some of those capabilities. And then this would be a great opportunity for where can you focus on roles where you could use your teacher background as a business analyst. So is there a tool that you use? Like classrooms right now are using so many technology tools. Would you be able to work at a company that's maybe building one of those technology tools, bringing your teacher experience into starting some business analysis? So that's kind of where I would say might be the sweet spot to just start your job search.
Yeah, and I'll chime in there too. With being a teacher, you've also got those skills around managing a classroom, which could translate to managing stakeholders, right? Running facilitation sessions, running effective meetings. That just, I think, is a natural part of the extension of being a teacher.
That's a great point.
I made the move from corporate technical trainer and technical writer into business analysis. My first job title was not business analyst, like so many of us. But I did rely on a lot of those skills around documentation, being able to make things well understood. Those were very transferable into the work that I did. And then eventually I worked on a team where I had a coach and also they invested in our training. So, but I never felt like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what I was doing. I mean, I wrote some really bad requirement documents, right? but
haven't we all at some point, right?
Of course. That's why we have coaches and in training, right? Because we all aren't perfect the first go round. Hey, I wanted to share this comment. This was from Christine. Christine actually has a Toastmasters ribbon, so congratulations, Christine.
Congratulations, Christine.
Yeah, Yeah, really well done. I think Toastmasters can add a lot of value, especially if you don't feel confident speaking. Even though business analysis professionals don't usually give formal presentations, they are standing in front of a room very often and speaking informally. So Toastmasters, I think, is a um, great way to get confident. Okay,
Yeah,
so let's see.
it's something I did in my career, and it made such a difference in my career in terms of my communication skills. So yeah, highly recommend it.
Yeah. All right, so this is actually another question from Lavanya. How do we prepare ourselves to break into industries when we don't have that particular domain expertise? Um, so kind of a slightly different play on transferable skills. How might we have that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I do feel like in the profession, there are still industries that really do value expertise in that industry, maybe even above business analysis skills, right? So, like, I say that because, like, also just to recognize there's some opportunities in some industries that might be easier to break into than others, or some that might require you to focus not as much on your business analysis skills, but actually looking at what do people do to break into that industry, right? Which is kind of above and beyond what we're talking about here. Is it a certain certification in that industry or a certain type of, like, that industry is going to have its own requirements. So, but outside of that, like, if it's an industry where you can find job descriptions that don't always require that kind of industry experience, or where they're not able to find candidates that have the experience they're looking for, you really want to speak to how your business analysis skills support you in learning new domains quickly, asking great questions, understanding how business processes and software requirements flow, even if you don't understand the like how the function works, like that you can ask the questions, that you can learn quickly, that you're going to engage well with the stakeholders who do have that domain expertise. And then also, I would say looking for parallels between whatever industries you do have experience in and the industry that you're looking to seek out, and seeing if you can find any commonalities that you can bring forward.
Yeah, I find the challenging part in this is getting past the recruiting stages where you've got
Mm-hmm.
the screening going on, because
Yeah.
the HR professionals, in my experience, on both sides of the equation, hiring and applying, they're really looking to screen things out. So if you don't have that experience, you might get kicked out of the process. But I
Mm-hmm.
think you have more success talking to the hiring manager, because as a business analysis professional, I'm on my third team now. I can understand how I can bring someone in and use the skills that they've got to work to my industry. But that's a very difficult concept for HR recruiters.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that is the frustration, is people kind of get filtered out, and then it becomes a defeating type of, it becomes a mindset game of, like, why am I getting filtered out from these opportunities? So yeah, and if you have the connection to the hiring manager, that's great. I also think, just what other connections might you have? Can you get an introduction or reach out to people on LinkedIn? Like, how can you make that, how can you kind of get a connection in, I think, is a great point.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think part of this is also, we haven't talked about it yet, networking. I read a great book years and years ago called "Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty." Great title, and it was basically build your network before you need it.
Mm-hmm.
So to your point, Laura, you might be able to network into someone in that organization and build that relationship that can get around the recruiter
Yeah.
blockade, if you will, to get in there. So I think that's a great suggestion.
Yeah. Go into user groups, conferences where you're going to meet people in that industry, starting to build that. Yeah. Really expanding what that network could be.
Yeah.
yeah, that's a really great point. One other thing I was going to add, because I've actually had this experience myself, moving from a domain I had been in for a number of years and moving into public utility. I actually used the fact that I didn't know that domain
Mm.
well to my advantage. And so many
Oh,
times, as I would be on a project, I would ask questions just to get people to tell me more about a particular concept, a particular thing that they were talking about quite easily, but I didn't know about. Now, this takes some courage, right? Because potentially it could come across or at least it might feel like, man, they're going to think I don't know anything. And the fact is, you might not. Um, but when you can ask questions about what they mean, one, you can learn from them, but also sometimes you can uncover assumptions, things that they take for granted that actually maybe need to be discussed. So, again, talking about those soft skills, courage can be one of them if you choose to go into a very different domain, because you need to be able to learn very quickly on the job, and you cannot be afraid of asking questions. So, alrighty. How about this? Here's another question that we have here. Um, how about tools? So here, business intelligence tools like Power BI, Tableau. Do we consider those? Would you consider those transferable skills, and are they essential to the work of business analysis professionals?
Yeah, I think I still see where there are, well, there's multiple categories of business analysis skills, right? But there are business intelligence BA roles and there are functional process software requirements BA roles. And so if you are looking to be a BA in the business intelligence space and do data analytics and work with these sorts of tools, it is an essential area of expertise to have experience and experience and expertise in using the tool that you're applying to use or is in place in your organization. But I feel there's plenty of business analysts that don't have those expertise. They're working on different kinds of projects. I've worked on a project that touched the business intelligence layer, but I wasn't an expert in the skill. So what happened is they had put in, I don't even remember what tool it was, but they had put in a tool and done the whole data warehousing thing. But then their processes weren't actually storing data that was meaningful, right? So then we had to reverse engineer what data was going into the data warehouse and figure out how do we need to update the software system so that could capture the right data, and what did the business process need to be so that the right data got captured. And then my interaction with that tool was just like, we need to make sure this field is captured in that tool, right? So I didn't need to understand that tool. So I think regardless, there are a lot of BA roles that don't require it. It's really what do you want to do with your career? What direction do you want to go in?
This is probably another area where terminology also might create some confusion, because organizations many times define roles for business analysts that don't have business analyst anywhere in the title. And they also define the responsibilities, which can look very different. There's not any kind of standardization of job titles or responsibilities for business analysis professionals. I know internally we created something that we refer to as the specialization wheel, that shows you, just all kinds of ways, all kinds of titles that you might encounter as a business analysis professional, whether you're on the business side, whether you're on the technology side, whether you are more tactical and operational, whether you are more strategic. Those titles may not tell you everything about what the role is or what you might have to do. So, I would say to Sultan here that there are some business analysis professionals that those would be transferable skills, but for many other roles, it may be good knowledge to have, but it might not necessarily be the thing that'll get you hired, but it's good to have. Let's see. All righty. I think we are. I don't see any more questions. Although I'll tell you, we have had there is a conversation happening in our chat today around ECBA and reading the Business Analysis Standard and the Babcock Guide. So there's a lot of those conversations going on. That might be a topic for the future, Scott, is to talk
Maybe.
about, yeah, those two books. Because yeah, there is definitely conversations happening there. So maybe how do we want to wrap up then? Maybe it's time to close.
We're going to publish this video on YouTube. The audio stream is going to go on to podcasts. So Laura, thank you for joining us today. We'll put a link to your YouTube channel in the YouTube video link, so people can get to it there. Congratulations again on your success there. You're really showing strong leadership in the YouTube space for our community.
Yeah, thank
Thank you
you. And
so much. And thank you so much for having me here today and for all that you do. I mean, 50 episodes is amazing. So,
yeah,
congratulations. That's a
yeah,
big
thank you for
contribution.
joining us. Yeah, thank you for joining us
Thank
today.
you. Yeah.
All right, so
So
let's
Susan, why
talk.
don't you tell folks about our next episode?
Yeah, and we'll see you again next week because September we're doing one of these every week. So next week we're going to talk about the 3 E's of business analysis. What could those be? So we'll talk about that, and we've actually got a number of guests that'll be joining us for that conversation. And we'll also be talking about the Festival of Business Analysis, which is coming up in October. So you'll want to see us then. And we want to thank you guys for joining us today. See you soon.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and we'll leave another one right here for you to help you in your business analysis career. If you haven't subscribed to the IIBA YouTube channel yet, you can click over here and click on the bell icon to get notified every time we publish a brand new video.